So education, I would say, is one big thing, and then the second thing is just try not to have like much leverage really.
All right, we have here our new friend, Yoann. I hope I'm saying that correctly.
Yoann, exactly.
Yoann, perfect. Maybe to start, you can share with our audience a bit about yourself, what you guys do. Please take it away.
So about myself. So co-founded Wintermute in 2017 as such. We've grown into being the largest spot crypto liquidity provider. So we do about, let's say, 16 to 20% of the total volumes. So if you've ever bought or sold crypto, essentially you probably traded against us at some point. We have grown to be about 100 people or so. So there's people who are very much based in London. There's about 70 people in London doing spot, and then we have a derivatives business essentially that we run from Singapore. I've recently moved to Singapore. Just got the EP. So basically, I discovered my flat essentially yesterday, and I love quite love the city really. The business overall is a global business. We don't really have a US presence as such, but we have more and more Asian presence. And I would say we're quite focused also. So people know about us from a trading perspective, but we also invest. So we've got about 100 investments on the balance sheet. There's no external fund. And then we started also, let's call it a third activity as such, more over the last year and a half or so, where we start to essentially incubate a few projects. So Bebop is one of them. It's essentially a DEX. Or an RFQ on chain, let's call it like this, and a few more projects are going to come out, and then we'll have a few things in the next month to announce on the incubation side. We're trying to bring more framework onto the incubation side.
Amazing! Wow, lots to look forward to then. Love it. So actually, my first question for you would be, where do you see the crypto market in 5 years' time?
Oh, 5 years time is. So what we see in a year and a half or so, we see some appetite, and so let's say. We're building two things. We're building for two different futures that are not necessarily incompatible. So essentially, we're building for a more institutional future where we do more and more OTC. We onboard more and more the more traditional hedge funds of the world, and they face us directly. So they trade with us directly. That's more very B2B, very institutional. There's also a future where there's very much a more DeFi friendly environment as such, where essentially it's much more democratized. And we also build for that. So we build a lot of infrastructure in the DeFi space. So in 5 years' time, I think there's a few things in terms of geographies and so on. And hopefully there will be some more regulatory clarity in a few different geographies. Even if it's not the case, I think a lot of people will actually just use basic sort of regulatory arbitrage and just go where they can actually innovate, where they have clarity, where they can clearly do business. That's one thing. So I think there's more clarity at the east at this stage, or even in Europe. So I don't know if you put Europe west or east from a perspective, but let's say having started in London, we got a good amount of clarity, to be honest, from the UK. I think there's a lot of infrastructure that's still being built in the West. I think there's a lot of apps. There's a lot of potential in apps in the app chain. So let's say it was just on this panel now where we're discussing essentially South Korea a lot, Japan a lot, and so on. And these are big countries where China to an extent is that if the sentiment was different around crypto, there's also a lot of IP. So IP, and it's often synonym of actually gaming in some ways. And then this is why everyone is hoping to get in the next 1 million, but hopefully many more millions of 2 billion extra crypto users as such.
Yeah, massive adoption.
In terms of the adoption of DeFi itself, that's still a big question for me. So we see. I was giving this talk a year and a half ago now already in Davos, and it was all about CeFi versus DeFi. And essentially, you see DeFi users being about, let's say, 1.4, 1.5% of the total crypto users. At the time, so a year and a half ago, we had about 400 million crypto users, and just about the 6 million or so, 6 million, DeFi users. Now we're about 600 million. I think it's basically anyone who's bought a coin at least once in their life, and then the percentage doesn't change. So I think maybe DeFi has to do a bit more in terms of UX UI, in terms of helping people to basically think more about or be reassured about sending funds on chain essentially, even it being for trading or for lending, and the big thing is around social security. I think just the not losing your keys essentially,
Very
being
important.
the big problem, or the big concern at least.
Yeah, still a lot of hurdles to jump through, but I think the future is bright, especially being in Asia with Hong Kong coming in with some regulatory clarity, like you said. Singapore, of course, very advanced in that regard. So it'd be really exciting to see what happens.
Yeah, and I think the next leg of that to go generally 5 or 10 years ahead is very much we see more and more Web 2.5 as such. So we see the Visa also so the DCS so if you local brands actually yesterday who launched their own tokens. And I think it's a bit of like the idea of like when do crypto just actually flip traditional finance essentially. And I think we see a lot of tokenization. We see a lot of Asian countries actually embracing maybe sometimes more STOs than even the token themselves, the crypto itself. So yeah, I think once that happens, you'll have a lot of traditional money essentially just getting into the space, and essentially everything gets tokenized at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, BlackRock, Larry Fink has said the future is tokenization, right? He believes we're definitely going down that route, and I think he's definitely playing that card in building, looking to build ETFs and everything else that they do as the biggest asset manager in the world. So really interesting to see what happens in that space. Really, really cool observations that you made. I wanted to maybe switch gears here, ask you on a more personal note. What has been your biggest lesson that you've learned so far in your crypto journey?
Oh, I think there's different things. There's things as an entrepreneur where I think managing long-term and short-term expectations is so like, we tend to think there's a lot of visionaries in this space and people who just look at things very, very long-term. And sometimes you need to bridge those gaps. You need to just help people along the way and just hold their hands a bit. And I think that's one thing. One thing I learned, and having been essentially in traditional finance before, and having this is my fourth company, not trying to evangelize the right people as such, or being quite conscious about who is just religiously against crypto as such, and not waste too much time there. That's also one of the lessons. So I think these sort of trends tend to flip at some point. There could be strange parallels with like the Communist Party in China that was actually just took about 20, 30 years to basically just pick up and then basically flipped the rest of the country. But you can look at many other trends or communities building essentially. I think it will just be obvious to the others at some point, but it's not obvious yet. So I think
Still a long way to go.
there's still a long way to go, and I think it's just focusing on the right things, just focusing on building has been really our strength. And we raised the first round in the previous winter, and then we continue. So it gave us actually just a pretty good culture in terms of being quite long-term focused and builders and so on. And I think it just gives us the right focus really.
Amazing to hear. So then, what is the one thing you're most proud of in your crypto journey so far?
I think it's just co-building Wintermute has been quite a nice story. Quite a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. But we've created, let's call it like ballpark figure, about 100 jobs, and then and with 100 investment participating in a lot of value creation across the space. We see ourselves very much that we strive to be the good agents in the space. So we're quite proud of this.
Definitely need that after what happened last year. So thank you for
Exactly.
doing that to crypto. Very much appreciated. All right. So my next question for you is, if you had just one advice that you could share with, let's say, a beginner, either a trader or investor, what is the one thing that they should really pay attention to and to set them up for the next cycle?
Two things. An advice I like to give, and it's just people have to do their own research as such, and it's just but what I would do if I were to start in the space, I'd be very careful with leverage. So essentially, treat it as a venture investment. Like venture investment, you don't really raise debt for it. It's not private equity as such. So you just put $1, you just and that's it. And then kind of write it off basically, and I think it's a better attitude to do it because, well, if you take leverage, basically you may be right over time, but you may just be, liquidated, or you may be kicked out of essentially would have been a good choice, a good trade as such. That's one aspect, and then trying to learn as much as possible, about the space. It's a very, very open community. I mean, I see this. I mentioned I've built other ventures in the hedge fund space and traditional finances, and people people can be very smart as well, but they're not necessarily as open and as approachable as people are in the crypto space. And it's just very easy to go to meetups, go to some conferences. Even if you can't afford a ticket, go to side events, and then there's plenty of ways to meet people you like or people you may invest in, and then learn from them, and just to get the interaction. And I think that learning curve is just really, really useful. Usually people don't really make money the first cycle they trade in. They tend to make money in the second, the third cycle, and so on. Because when it works, they tend to take the money too quickly, and then when it doesn't work, this sometimes just gets it's stuck in the pilot. Yeah, exactly. So education, I would say, is one big thing, and then the second thing is just try not to have much leverage really.
Right. Those are great tips, actually. Thank you so much for sharing. My last question for you is, what would you like to say to Bitget on their 5th year anniversary?
Oh, happy birthday! And well, let's just try to make sure that we do more business together, essentially. And then congrats on the whole flurry, the universe around Bitget, essentially between Foresight Ventures, I think it's Foresight Press,
Bitget Wallet,
and then building a pretty good ecosystem and pretty big presence online and offline.
For sure.
So congratulations.
Thank you so much. Yoann, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Likewise.
Really enjoyed talking to you. And that's it from us.
Thank you.